Hello, I'd like to welcome you again to the Weekly Grind with Jim Serace. I'm Larry Macon Jr., and I'm so excited again to continue my talk with Jim. And, Jim, you mentioned 4 things that you thought would help people be successful last week, but I want you to tackle another one of those for us.
Sure will, and good memory, Larry. And there were 4 things, and that was from my memory. It was pray, be humble, be grateful, and be generous. So let me talk a little bit about generosity, because I think that is so key, and I constantly challenge our people to be generous. I remember back, decades ago when my wife and I were, building the business. And anybody who's ever built a business understands that you reside in a lot of red ink before you ever move into prosperity. And so such it was, with us. And, I remember that was almost to the day that, I was convicted. And even though we didn't have the money back then, but I just felt that we needed to start giving. And there's a thing called in the church place, it's called tithing. And when you tithe, it means giving 10% of your income, and not, over the leftovers, what you have left over. I guess if people waited to give until they had leftovers, they would never give, right?
Right.
And so, but it says give your first 10%. So even though we didn't have the money, we started giving 10%. And again, I could probably mark that very day that was a day that we moved from red ink to black ink.
Wow.
There was a lady, an older widow that lived, some 2,000 plus years ago. And, back then, Larry, it's not like today in church, where, they hand a basket around. But back then, when you walked into the temple, in the back of the temple was a basket. And as people walked in, they would go ahead and put their tithe or their offerings in the basket, before they actually entered the temple. And so what happened back then is a lot of the people would kind of stand around the back just to kind of see what everybody was giving. And a lot of rich people would come in and they would, give a lot of money. And there's this old widow that came in. And she put in a basket what might be equivalent today to pennies. And so when she dropped that money into the basket, all the rich people were standing around just saying, oh, look what she gave. She didn't give hardly anything. They were dissing her, right? Well, Jesus happened to be standing in the back of the temple and he witnessed all this. And here's what he said. He said, I tell you the truth that, you all gave out of your riches.
Right.
But this widow gave all that she had.
Wow.
Now that was like 2,000 years ago, right?
Right.
And that moment, that has impacted, it's written in the Bible, that has impacted probably millions from that day and still to today. And, it's read about and it impacts people and imparts to them a spirit of generosity. I was, we do a lot of philanthropy, and one of the organizations we give to, Larry, is called Love Inc.
Yes.
And it's a great organization that helps people, and we've been consistent in giving to them. And one year they asked me if they do an annual fundraiser where they invite business people like myself, and they asked if I would speak at the end in order to challenge those business people that were there to perhaps give to their organization. So when they introduced me, it was a rather lengthy and charitable introduction. And so when I got up in front, I told the people, I said, well, thank you. That was a very generous introduction. But to tell you the truth, I'm selfish. And I paused. Everybody's wondering, well, what's he going to say next, right? And I said, well, because in the Bible it says, if you sow sparingly, you reap sparingly. But if you sow generously, you reap generously. So I find in my life, the more I give is the more that I receive. It also says in the Bible, it says, in the measure you give, it'll be measured back to you. And it goes on to say, pressed down, shaken together, and overflowing. Now, I'm not sure what that means, pressed down, shaken together, overflowing. But it sounds
a lot.
I like the overflowing part,
I love it. I love it, Jim. And it's so good to know that generosity is the key to success. So I appreciate it, Jim. I appreciate that word of knowledge. And I want to thank you for giving us this knowledge today. And I want to thank all of our viewers for tuning in to the Weekly Grind on It's About You. And we've got to continue this conversation, Jim. So we're going to have everyone who's watching today to go to YouTube. Go to youtube.com/The Weekly Grind with Jim Surace. And there you'll get some more motivation. You can see some of these clips and even today's clip. But also, I want you to email us at jimweeklygrind@gmail.com. Thanks again, Jim, for the knowledge this week.
Thank you, Larry.